Hello and welcome to part 2, otherwise known as Battles of Tribals, Battles and Daring Class Destroyers. The genesis of, well, I go by my book title, The Genesis of the Modern General Purpose Destroyer. Or if I go by the title I'm using today, The Back Pocket Cruisers. Yeah, I do love them. Now, I will say this thing, I'm recording this a little bit later than I recorded the tribal one. I've been dealing with some fun stuff. The usual things for my evening. Mostly more conversations with Pathé and various other places, which do send emails surprisingly late to try and see if I could get some of that wonderful footage, which I would have so loved to put into these videos, but I can't. Because honestly, they're not budging and I'm not paying £300 for 20 seconds of footage. I'm just not. I wouldn't care if I was a millionaire. And I understand they're a private archive. I understand they have to make money. But the footage is already 80 years old. And frankly, I'm fairly sure they've made enough of it from it over the years. They could be charging, well, honestly, I'd have been happy to pay probably 90. If they'd said 90, it would have been expensive. I'd have probably only got one of them, but I'd have probably got one of them, one of the tribal ones, but they didn't. So it's battle class cruisers and battle class destroyers, which are also back pocket cruisers again. Only these are a little bit more aggressive, definitely more aggressive. And you'll notice I have changed the microphone setup. The microphone is right next to me instead of its normal place, which is hovering over the camera. And the reason I've done this is I can talk slightly quieter, but still hopefully be heard perfectly. Right. Bilge pumps. Now, I just love this. I just love those recordings. I love doing it. Links down below. Hopefully it's to, if I've done the right programming, it's to the brand new system they have for it, the new channel. One came out yesterday. Second one comes out tomorrow. Another one comes out next Wednesday. Then another one next Friday. It's fun. It's so much fun. Right, I'm going to change the computer screen around because otherwise my eyes are going to be constantly going down that way. Right. So, Stanley Goodall. Now, the thing here is I could have put in stats about him. I could have talked about him a bit, but I actually wanted to just give you an example of his own words. And frankly, this is a quote I've used in my book from him. And I think it sums him up in so many ways. He's just heard a paper put forward by a very eminent, in the time, Rear Admiral, who's beyond question, brilliant man. You can just imagine the people talking about him. And he literally takes the guy to pieces. Very politely, but takes him to pieces. And this matters because the battle class are built during World War II. Okay? The tribals are planned and conceived prior to World War II. And the first thing is they're being used a lot. They're really being used a lot. But suddenly the Royal Navy is noticing, hang on, we keep using these ships a lot and their luck runs out. Okay, we need to replace them. And really the only limitation that's going to be on the battle class is the number of Mark 37 fire control directors they can get their holds of. if the Royal Navy could have got their hands on more, they would have built more. And in fact, that actually delays the production of them quite a bit. It's the Mark 37 fire control system, and it's a few other things which delayed their construction, which is why, despite them being started off in, broadly speaking, 1942, they take so long. But anyway, Stanley Goodall is the one who is really responsible for the battles and the darings. And he's responsible. When I say that, he takes his friend's vision and he keeps it true to his friend's vision. And that was Henderson. Henderson's dead by this point, but his vision of a back-pocket cruiser, of a destroyer which could fill the roles, and that's important, could fill the roles of light cruiser and of heavy destroyer, was very much part of it, and very much part of the Navy by this time. The Tribals cemented themselves in terms of their performance. A lot of people liked them. Some people, of course, didn't like them. You never get anyone. You're never in an organization as rich and as large as the Royal Navy at this period. In fact, at any period, you're going to get them all to agree, and you won't get all historians to agree, but vast majority of the time, like them. They liked what the Tribals did, and they wanted something more. They wanted more fighting destroyers. They wanted more back pocket cruisers, and wanted more general purpose ships, especially with good air defense systems. So, and with this in mind, they went to work. And in this case, Stanley Goodall is given a bit of a blank check when it comes to battle class. He started off work by that very good gentleman called Admiral Fraser. Fraser of North Cape. Fraser of the British Pacific Fleet. Fraser, who goes on to become First Sea Lord. That is the admiral who was chosen to jump into Henderson's shoes when Henderson unfortunately dies and takes over running as Third Sea Lord for a part of World War II. And really, the battle class starts under him. And in many ways, they're a continuation of what Henderson had planned for the L class but wasn't allowed to build. There was a huge kerfuffle over it, and someday I will would love to do a book, or maybe I'll probably do a video first, but do a book on the ships which Henderson didn't get to build, the Navy we could have had. And that would be an interesting thing. But in this case, the battles get to continue. Their stats. Well, overall length, 379 feet. Beam, 40 feet, 3 inches. Draft, 12 foot, 6 inches. And a full load of 3,361 tons. They're getting big. They're getting really big. But again, it's only a few meters more than the Tribals. They're a bit bigger, but not massively bigger. The 1943s have an even wider beam, and the reason they could get a wider beam is because, honestly, the Royal Navy is worrying about how it's going to control all the anti-air firepower they have. And so they can raise the radars up a bit, they make them a bit wider. Kind of like what's going on with the Type 26 for the Australians at the moment, rumor-wise. They've gone for the slightly bigger hull option, it seems, to better accommodate the air defense radar. Because you're taking an anti-submarine warfare frigate, you still want to be an anti-submarine warfare frigate, and you want it to also be an air defense system. In this case, they were taking a air defense destroyer, which was a general purpose destroyer, and they were umping up its anti-air capabilities a bit more, even. And, to fit in director, to modify the gun positions and various other things, they actually end up also raising the bridge up by 9 inches. So the bridge on the 1943s is 9 inches higher than the bridge on the 1942s. All sorts of things have to be done to make the design work. And that's all because of changing one of the guns, the aft gun position. So you literally, it's changing one weapon system leads to them having to make the ship fatter and make the bridge 9 inches higher. And this is in World War II. These ships are nowhere near as complicated in many ways as the modern ones, although they are as comparatively as complicated for that time as they would be today. So this is why I laugh when people say, "Oh, they just want to do this, and I don't know why it's causing all this trouble." And I'm kind of going, "Well, you've got systems balanced in systems balanced in systems in a warship, and everything has to work together, and everything has to be put in the right position to work with each other in the right way, or you have to redesign the whole thing." So yeah, one little change is never one little change. But I do love the battle class. The battle class are, and I'm going to discuss them more once we get into the pictures, really, because the battle class is as aggressive as you can make a destroyer look. I don't know how you can make it look more aggressive. Honestly, it looks like the guns are so daring to get to the enemy, they're actually pulling the ship apart. That's HMS Jutland. Look at the lines. She is built for speed. She's got a slightly different hull line to the Tribal class, but look at that bow. And look at the bow beneath. My background picture is a Tribal, a battle, and a daring. And you can see the daring hull line below on the screen to this battle, and you can see what's happened. She's got a far more straighter, far easier to build bow line, but she's still got a bit of the curve there and a bit of the sweep. And you can see those double 4.5s. Now, the interesting thing about those is to get a 4.5 inch, because the development of the 4.5 inch double had been slowed down by World War II because they'd done this moratorium building, etc. Those are between deck mounts, not upper deck mounts, which is how the normal destroyers normally work, and including quite a lot of light cruisers. If you consider the C's and D's vintage used upper deck mounts rather than between deck mounts. Those are 4.5s, the same ones you would get mounted on a capital ship. Now, what's interesting about that was when I was looking at the options which Henderson was considering for the L class to get them into service, those larger L class, which were going to have turrets. That was one of the options. I see. Nice way. I could never really write it in a book that was one of the options because I am reading into the paper. But there is references to the mounts which are being used on the aircraft carriers. Those are the mounts from the aircraft carriers, and they're used. So I think this had already been being looked at, and I think that was one of the options being considered for the L class back in 1937-ish, 38-ish, when they're first looking at it. So the Super L class, which weren't built, well, until you build the battle class. So it's really kind of interesting. It was really, really interesting that it happens. Anyway, so if I open my notes on the battle class and I stop shaking the microphone, I do apologize for that. The trouble with using the book as notes is that I keep spotting and occasionally spot things, and then I go, "Oh, I'd like to rewrite that," or "Oh." I love these ships. And oh, by the way, I've got to do someone please remind me at some point to do HMS Savage. She deserves her own video, though. She deserves something else herself. Right. So the very, very 1937s Ooh, they were capable of 50,000 horsepower. The engine arrangement they had. Everything was truncated into there, but they were fitted with Type 275 radar, Type 282, Type 293, and Type 291. So they had to have a lot of power generation to power those radars. They still used the fuse keeping clock, well, a version of the fuse keeping clock, and the modified to what's called the Mark 6 director. They had some which ended up being fitted with the Mark 6, some which ended up being fitted with the Mark 37, because the Mark 37 was always being delayed, caused a lot of problems for them. And the Mark 6 was done with the fuse keeping clock, which was what the tribals had as their system. Now, if I'm going to talk about these lovely ships, I have to, of course, discuss the fact that, as you can see, their guns are all mounted forward. So, here's the thing. If you read anyone else's book, pretty much, they will tell you that it was done as a result of a study which said they only needed to mount forward. They only need these guns forward. They don't need guns facing rear. Those people are wrong. Well, they're right, but they are wrong as well. Okay, they're right because there was a study which did say it. But seeing as you can see, if you look at the daring class down below, a gun does appear facing rear, and the amount of debate they had, and including the 1943s, end up with a single 4-inch mounted so that it could cover the aft after the funnel, and that was the weapon system which caused the whole system, the 9-inch increase in height of the bridge and all sorts of things. That really doesn't stack up. It really, really doesn't stack up. In fact, it's rather silly to claim it. So one has to ask, why do they claim it? Why do people say this? Well, because there is a study which says it's acceptable. It's an acceptable risk in wartime. These are the wartime back pocket cruisers. And you've got a between decks mount, which is very expensive and far more complicated to build than an upper decks mount. It's something you don't normally fit in destroyers. And actually, my sneaking suspicion is the fact that they had these being built and they had them available is because they were being aimed for another class of ship entirely. I think these were potentially the mounts which were to be used maybe on more carriers, but also alternatively possibly for the D-class cruiser upgrade project. It's a very tempting scenario that. I can't prove it, the records don't exist, and it's just a hunch. So it could be me completely talking out my rear end, but it's something I'm thinking. It fits with other things I've read, but I would never be one of those historians who just goes, "It's this way." I don't have the documents to prove it, so I cannot say it 100%. But between deck mounts, etc., there are a lot of long lead items, and they're being ordered. So that means they must have been being ordered probably prior to 1939. At least parts of them and parts and components, especially for building up. So, whilst yes, the program was being expanded for the carriers, I don't think they were being ordered originally in the aim for destroyers, and especially not for a destroyer class which hadn't even been built or ordered yet. So the only options that they could come for would be a cruiser upgrade project. That's the only thing they'd fit in for, because they're heavy duty turrets. So yeah, well, heavy duty. These are the turrets that you fit on capital ships and aircraft carriers normally. Yes, they've been slightly modified, but not that much. Not that much at all. So that's also one of the reasons why they're positioned so far forward. Again, If the rear doesn't matter, then why are you positioning your guns so far forward they can cover the rear so well? Why do that if you don't need to worry about it? This stuff doesn't stack up. HMS Trafalgar, really showing off the speed, the rakish lines, the maneuverability of the class. That is the thing. They were big ships, but they belied it with their maneuverability. The really sad thing for the battle class is that due to the various complexities of the equipment that was being built, and remember, these are being built as your top-of-the-line destroyers, so they take longer to build than the War of Monarchy destroyers. They take longer to build than pretty much anything else. Only one of them manages to get into service before the war ends. And the trouble is, they are built for war. They are your back-pocket cruisers, but they are orientated on the war fighting, not the presence mission. So this is why they're festooned with guns. They are pretty much, if you ask most young children to draw, who are interested in warships, to draw a warship, it will come out usually festooned with guns all over the place. It will look like a battle class destroyer. And they are gorgeous like that. But they are so much designed and influenced by war in their construction that when it comes to peace, they are suffering. They are not really, they can't really step up into the cruiser role, despite them being very impressive ships, but they're a bit too aggressive for the presence mission. That might sound strange, but they're a bit too intimidating. They're just too aggressive looking. You have to be intimidating, but in the right way for the presence mission. I don't like to use these words because sometimes they sound very much like exclusionary, but gravitas. Your design has to have a certain gravity, a certain sort of style. And the trouble is, these look so heavily armed. They are basically you turning up going, yeah, this person's turning up. They haven't got space for much of a party, but by gum can they give you a party, a lot of fireworks display if they want to. If they'd been slightly bigger and stuff had been spread out a bit more, perhaps that would have worked. We won't ever know. But they are gorgeous looking ships, and they are very, very potent. They don't get to do as much in warfighting as they'd have liked. You see, the trouble is, they get into service, and once they're into service, they are pretty much on duty as the heavy destroyer. There are other destroyers which are cheaper to keep going in that role. Well, and the destroyer fleet role. Basically, if the Cold War had turned hot in the early 1950s, these ships would have been front and center doing all sorts of nasty things to anyone who got in Britain's way. But the trouble is, it didn't. Thankfully, it didn't because of the nuclear weapon scenario. But for these ships, it means that they are built for war, and World War II is ended by nuclear bombs, and their chance for showing what they could really do in war is ended by nuclear bombs. So the world not only lost a lot of people. No, that's a terrible joke. I won't make that, but you know, I can get a bit wrapped up in these ships, I suppose. They are beautiful ships, though, and look at that. Look at those lines. Also, this was a loss of the Royal Navy really, really making rude remarks towards the French. This class is pretty much one great big one-fingered, possibly two-fingered salute to the French, considering all their names. There we go. So, for a class built in World War II, when the Royal Navy is taking on the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese, The 1942 build program is HMS Armada, Barfleur, Cadiz, Camperdown, Finisterre, Gabad, Gravelines, Hogue, Lagos, Saints, Sluys, Solbay, St. James, and St. Kitts. And Trafalgar and Vigo. The 1943 build program is Agincourt, which was a battleship in World War One. So that shows you how much this the cause of the large fleet destroyer of the the back pocket cruiser has developed in this time. Asin, Alamein, Barossa, Corunna, Dunkirk, Jutland, Matapan, and then for the Australian Navy, it's Anzac and Tobruk. So, pretty much Alamein, Matapan. They're the recent ones. Dunkirk. It's the Royal Navy just putting, I don't know, two fingers up to everyone, especially their French allies. You think de Gaulle was annoying the Winston Churchill? You have no idea how much the Free French sometimes annoyed the Royal Navy in World War II. They wanted to keep their guns operating. All the other Allied navies were quite happy to accept British weaponry. The French wanted to keep their own guns working, and they had different calibers and different measurements and all sorts of things. You could understand it because it's national pride, but at a certain point, there's a case of the nicest way: be nice to the people who are hosting you and let the logistics work. But why expect people to be helpful just because there's a war, or to forgo national pride? Now, the other interesting thing about the 4.5 and these double 4.5s is the sheer firepower they bring to the party. They do a lot of damage. I want to go back to St. James. Where's St. James? Oh, that's St. James. Okay. So, the interesting thing I like about this picture, and I forgot I had it here, is that that's HMS Vanguard, closest to me, the one you can see part of, and that is St. James off her. And you can see on both they have similar fire control directors and these things going on. This is the really interesting thing. There was actually a debate at one point whether to use the fire control directors aim at going to Vanguard instead of her give her something else, and instead give them to get more battle class. So that is how important this class were viewed. Now, the reason I haven't gone into the 1944s here is because that's the daring class. Well, what becomes the daring class. So we're not going to discuss them yet. They're going to get their own video, even though there is only 8 of them. Technically 4x2, but we'll leave that to one side for a bit. These are big, powerful destroyers. But they are called the battle class, and whilst they are the successors in terms of the back pocket cruisers, they are the World War II successors, and they're very much a war-built class. You can tell that in their design, in their emphasis, in the compromises which are being made. The tribal class are a compromise based on the realities of the treaty system and of the finances available at the time. The battle classes are a compromise based on we have a war going on, and the most critical thing we can do is supply as much anti-aircraft firepower as possible. And that anti-aircraft firepower has to be something very specific. 40 millimeters. They are festooned with various types of 40mm mounts. And they're festooned with them because those will blast away at anything. Now, I have been over this before, but basically the problem you have with air defense at this time is whilst radar is developing at a pace and radar control is developing at a pace, your effective range where you're starting to get an accurate picture of aircraft is relatively close compared to today. And the bigger guns, as nice as they are and as useful as they are not really able to put enough volume of fire up quick enough, are not able to swivel round to the target quick enough and put up enough volume of fire quickly enough to really deliver the effects they can do. There's a lot, if you look at them on paper, you go, ooh, this rate of fire, this power is brilliant. But the thing is, it's not just being able to fire the guns. You have to bring the guns to bear on the target, and how far away are you detecting that target? How much time do you have to bring it to bear and range it? A 40mm mount moves just that much quicker, bears just that much faster, and can deliver just enough firepower. So this is why the 40mm is the primary weapon. It's rather like when we're asking, why did the Royal Navy pick tribal class destroyers to provide the majority of their vessels in the 10th flotilla clearing the English Channel? It's because they are the ones with carrying the most guns and most able to therefore to clear out a channel full of E-boats and enemy destroyers. And tribal class destroyers did have a track record of beating up German destroyers by this point, which was very, very impressive. In the same way, when you're building in the height of World War II, when you are building your what's going to be your premier fleet destroyer, your critical asset for defending your carriers, your battle capital ships, supporting amphibious operations, operating independently, scouting ahead, harassing enemy targets, all those sort of things, especially when you're considering the realities of trying to implement a blockade on Japan, which was being considered because, you know, what happens if the nuclear weapons don't work, and there's quite a lot of levels which don't even know about nuclear weapons. Then you're still going to need to do a blockade or possibly an invasion of Japan. Either way, it's not going to be fun. A lot of 40mm is what is the answer. And this is what this class is being built for. They are being built for the war against Japan by the point of 1944. So when you start to see the changes being made into their designs late in the build process, you know exactly what those changes are orientated around. They're around the war in Japan. And that's another reason why they get delayed as things go on, because honestly, they keep being slightly modified a bit, just to make them a bit better for the likely war they're going to be fighting in. Are they going to be fighting in the Arctic? Are they going to be fighting in the Mediterranean? Are they going to be fighting here? It just keeps changing things around. It does delay them. But they're very good-looking ships. I think I've said that a few times before, but I want to emphasize it. And they do sort of continue the tribal tradition, or almost been established a bit before the tribals, of that sort of angled, to an extent streamlined superstructure, although not really streamlined. And radar return-wise, that would have been so massive. Colossal. But still pretty. Brighton. It's Backpacker Cruisers Day. And we have Patreon video. In Happy, what stuff would you put in warehouse and then World War I, World War II? And naval diplomacy coming up. Ooh. And again, I'm going for the 35-minute line. Ooh. Courtesy CIA, Royal Navy Operation Indian Ocean from 1941 to 43. That features into the battle class. That does filter into the battle class. Those experiences, they really do. And we have Twitter at AC_Naval History. Patreon, AC Naval History. Please, that is my book fund. It really does matter to me. I really do like my books. No, seriously, but yeah, it is. And Global Maritime History, which is a load of pals of mine who have worked really hard there. and I publish some articles as well. I'm the ship research editor for my sins. Thank you, and I hope this has been loud enough and volume-wise enough, because I've got the gain up full and the volume all up full, and everything should be massively full. Take care, and that's over my 35 minutes. Thank you everyone for subscribing. Please share and subscribe and like. All those things matter because apparently it helps more people find me. Thank you.